Hi there. So we're going to get started with tonight's webinar, which again comes in two parts. So the first half, we're going to talk about recruiting children and young people to groups to help grow our groups. And in the second part, we're going to specifically focus on outreach involving schools in order to do that. So my name's Pippa Gardner. I am the communications manager and the project coordinator on our new groups project in the Eastern region at Woodcraft Folk. So in tonight's first half of the webinar around recruiting children and young people, we're going to talk about four things. So firstly, we're going to look at readiness to grow and what are some of the key considerations about being ready to invite new young people to help grow your group. And then we're going to talk about how we might go about finding new members and some of the techniques we might approach for that. Thirdly, we're going to talk about being inclusive and welcoming and making those first group meetings that a young person attends special and giving them a sense of what being part of the organisation involves. And then we're going to finish up with just some top tips. So in terms of readiness to grow, I think there are a few key questions which you might want to ask. And I've got three here on the slide. The first one, thinking about growing your group, is how many young people could your group night venue hold? Are you at capacity or is there space for more young people? In most cases, I imagine there will be space and you wouldn't need to think about moving the group, especially in summer when you might take more group night activities outside. There's less constraints on the number of young people who can be involved. But if it is a constraint and your group is feeling at capacity, is there a bigger venue you could use? Or is it about thinking about whether there's a possibility of setting up another group for the same age group somewhere else in your town, city, or area? The second question is, do you have resources for more young people? Thinking about activities where you might need kind of like pens and pencils, have kind of games where you're like balls or parachutes. And if you would need more resources to enable young people to participate, could you apply for funding for more equipment? You might want to check out the fundraising pages on the website. And there's lots of different places you might approach. A lot of our groups have been very successful in getting funding from the co-op Good Causes. So that might be one to think about, or even just kind of local supermarkets or businesses that might be able to donate in kind some of those resources you might need to enable you to grow and welcome those young people. And then thirdly, how many regular volunteers do you have? Based on our recommended ratios, how many young people could your current volunteer support? And maybe do you need to look for more volunteers before you grow, or have you got scope for having more young people to the volunteers who you currently have? So our good practice recommendation is to work at a 1:3 ratio for the woodchip age group, 1:5 for elfins, 1 adult to every 8 pioneers, and 1 adult to every 10 venturers. This is obviously also bearing in mind the safeguarding requirement of having 2 members of Woodcraft Folk with their DBS check in place, attending every group night session, and bearing in mind that if you young people's individual needs and abilities, so you might have a lot of older elfins who are nearly pioneer age group and feel that you can work at a slightly different ratio, or you might have members of your group who have additional needs and need a volunteer in particular to support them, or generally a higher ratio of adults to children. So it's about thinking about that in terms of your group makeup and making sure that as soon as you've got new young people who want to join your group, they can be involved fully, welcomed fully, and everyone can undertake activities safely. So once you're ready to go, finding new members, we've got lots of suggestions of different ways that you might want to try to find new young people. We found that different things have worked better in different places. So generally our suggestion would be to try several different approaches. So you might like to try a bring a friend evening where young people in the group invite somebody they know to come along and try woodcraft folk for the first time. Or you might run a separate taster activity day and promote that through a variety of different means, your social media, local media, posters, flyers, trying to get them flyers sent home from schools, and having that open access to anybody in the community who might want to come and give some activities to try. We might want to do outreach activities at schools, which we will talk about in detail in the second half of this webinar. You can also look to do a social media call out. So growing your social media following can help you recruit both volunteers and young members and to be kind of better known and understood more generally in the community. But you might want to make a specific post inviting parents of children and young people usually to come along and try out a group night. You might want to try attending community events. So these would be local events like fetes or fun days in a park or community centre. And they can again help you find both potential volunteers and young members. And we had actually a webinar about attending community events earlier in the series, which you can watch back on the website as well if you're interested. And then there's the kind of standard approach of posters and flyers and getting them out as much as possible and as visible as possible so people see the message about woodcraft folk in as many different places. You could put them up in supermarkets, on community notice boards, libraries, schools perhaps. Definitely ask your local co-op or other supermarket if you can put one up. You also want to try putting them up in the place where your group nights happen so that other users of that space see it. Or you can try, we'll talk about this more, approaching local schools to see if you can send flyers home with young people. And you can also try sending press releases to local papers. They're very interested in any story that has a particular local interest angle. And again, there are some press release templates on the website that you might like to adapt and try using to get some coverage locally. So then when we've got young people interested in joining our group, we want to make sure that we are inclusive and they receive as warm a welcome as possible. So thinking ahead about how your venue and programme can be made inclusive to young people can help rather than having that experience of trying to be reactive to them when a young person arrives at your group. You want to think about different backgrounds, different genders, different abilities. It's not just a question of how physically accessible is the space. It's questions around the gendering of toilets might be a concern for young people of diverse genders, and thinking about how you approach the conversation around paying subs and whether you do that on a donation only basis and use that language about it being a suggested donation, which can help alleviate some of the concern for young people from more disadvantaged backgrounds who might not have the money to pay a full subscription every week. Again, we have another webinar where we've looked particularly at inclusivity, which you might want to have a look back on. There has been a previous whole webinar series that you can find on the website. So any questions about being inclusive, there is lots more webinar training available that you can have a look at. We also want to avoid making it feel as though parental volunteering is a condition of young people taking part for Elfins, Pioneers and Venturers. Depending on the age group of wood chips, it might be a condition of your group. especially for the younger ages. But when children are of kind of the older age group of Elfin Pioneers and Adventurers, we want to welcome them and encourage parents to help if they're able, but we don't want to make it feel like if the parents can't give up their time to run sessions, that the young people can't take part. And then the final part of a really warm welcome is just make sure you include new members and their parents in the same way as those who are already part of the group, making them feel welcome and included. So whether that's an email list or a Facebook group of parents, make sure that they have all the same information and they're not missing out in any way. And try to have words to any songs you might close or open your meeting with. Have those written down for new members so that they don't feel out of depth or isolated at that part of the meeting. Recognise that it will be a new song for them and try and make that as easy as possible for them to learn it and take part. So our top tips for recruiting children to help grow your group. Think about how you can include new members in your group so that they feel welcome from the first night. That's doing some of that readiness to grow, asking yourself some of those questions, and then just generally making sure that the resources for them to take part as fully as possible are available for the first group night they come to. And then try several different ways of spreading the word to reach a diverse cross-section of your community. Different kind of approaches work differently in different places, but also for different people. So putting out the information through lots of different ways will make sure that your group is open to young people regardless of their background, whether they're in school or home educated, their ability, their gender, and making sure that that information is accessible to all will open out the opportunity for young people to come forward and decide to participate in your group. So if you have any questions about this first half of the webinar, feel free to add a comment to the video, or if easy way to get a quicker answer would be to drop myself an email, and my email is here on the slides. It's pippa.gardner@woodcraft.org.uk, and any questions about recruiting children and young people to your group, I'll be happy to answer. So in the second half of tonight's webinar, we're going to move on to talk about outreach in schools. And this can be a really good way to recruit children and young people to your group. So it can help you to expand your existing group. It can help you to start a new group in a new location, or if an existing group is full. It gives you a ready-made audience of children and young people who are going to be the right age for your group, because they're going to be in age year groups. So approaching schools can be really positive because teachers love what Woodcraft Folk has to offer, and once they know about what it is and what we can do, there will be opportunities to either kind of give a talk, a presentation in an assembly, or run a taster activity as two of the key ways that we can do outreach with schools. But the question is how to get in and talk about it. And so we're going to talk about some of the key selling points you can use to help suggest what Woodcraft Folk activities could bring to the school setting if you were allowed to run activities there. So we acknowledge that the schools right now are very busy places, and so it can be difficult to get the time from people to be able to get in the front door or to find time in the curriculum for an outreach activity. But we can try and suggest something that fits and can actually make their lives easier. And it's just about how we go about explaining that. So schools might be really concerned about Ofsted improving their standards, quality marks, things like that. But at Woodcraft Folk, we can use and highlight some of particularly our aims and principles, and some of our activities that are underpinned by those aims and principles, in order to show how we can actually help them with some of the things that they are concerned about. And in particular, this can be particular times of the year can be easier to approach schools. So we have found that there's a more ready reception to Woodcraft Folk sessions at kind of the end of term, or kind of linked to themed days or weeks they might have in special times of the year. It's about getting to know that school and how it might fit within their timetable and the kind of thing they offer. Many have kind of activities weeks or might have special like science and nature days. About finding out about when those happen and approaching them with good notice before that can help your success in being able to run a workshop in a school. So when it comes to approaching the school, a personal contact is the best way in. So you might have a child of school age, or some of the children in your group might all attend the same school. That can be a good way to try and find an individual to approach, to have a conversation about getting into school. Then you might want to send a short email to that contact, or a named member of staff that contact is able to point you towards as the best person to approach. And in that email, you want to outline, do you want to do a presentation or offer a activity? This will depend on the availability of the volunteers as to what they can do. Are they able to go in the morning to run an assembly, or would it be better if you could offer an after school activity? Being upfront about what you could offer and not over promising. But then make sure you outline what are the key selling points of the session or presentation or assembly that you might be able to do. You want to make sure that you also explain what Woodcraft Folk is and give them the details of the local group, and then mention your volunteer role in the group, and particularly that you have a DBS check and some of the kind of safeguarding background to help them feel assured that that safeguarding would apply to how you'd work with children and young people in their school as well. So when you're thinking about what activity you could link to something that the school is already doing, or something topical to the time of year, or something that's been in the news. Some schools work around termly themes, and you can find those sometimes on their websites. And then some do special themed days or weeks around, say, the environment. That might be specific to the school, or they might tie into national ones like Science Week or Refugee Week. And you could also link in with festivals from other religions or cultures that might fit with some of the work that they want to do in their school. You might want to think about, and this is again where looking at the school's website can give you some useful background. Some of the key things to mention that you could tie into or help them work towards is particularly different kind of quality marks, or things in their ethos and statement that they might have on their website. It might be listed as kind of a heads welcome message, or in a separate section like vision and values. Quality marks that they might be working towards, that Woodcraft activities might kind of help them work towards, and evidence is learning outside the classroom, particularly if you did a outdoor activity with them in their kind of school grounds. Schools of sanctuary, or values-based education. You might be able to tailor an activity to help them and give them more value to running activity in the school. Another aspect that it's worth mentioning that you can help fulfill through running particularly a taster activity or an assembly in the school is SMSC, and this stands for Spiritual, Moral, Social, Cultural Education. That again has a quality mark, and it's recognised as particularly important to Ofsted, so a lot of schools are interested in it and working towards it. And there's lots, this in particular as a quality mark is something which fits very nicely with our aims and principles. So aspects of spiritual, so the idea of the organisation being open to all faiths and none, can be explored through activities about diverse cultures and religions from around the world. There's also exploring aspects of nature and environment, particularly those around kind of a sense of awe and wonder around the natural world, and then reflecting on feelings, values of individuals and of groups as a whole. Moral education, so you might have a debating activity, you might talk about moral and ethical issues such as peace, and you might think about kind of consequences of actions. So some of our areas, activities around fair trade might be really useful for this area. Also similarly that also links into kind of the social aspect. So thinking about cooperation, education for social change, these can link in to an area of curriculum that schools are asked to look at called British values. And there's also kind of thinking about the topics of democracy, liberty, respect, tolerance, equality and children's rights all link into this kind of social area. And there's lots of examples of activities that link into these concepts on the Woodcraft website in our resource section. And then finally, the cultural aspect, thinking about international friendship, celebrating diversity, and chance to participate in kind of cultural opportunities linked to diverse cultures internationally. If you are going to run a presentation in a school, probably for an assembly, you want to plan for it to be about 15 to 20 minutes with a chance for children to ask questions. Often the school will have like a projector set up, so it's worth having a PowerPoint with photos of your group, and there is a example PowerPoint that will be listed on the page of this video if you're watching it back online. Check that you are able to take it in on a memory stick and the sound if you wanted to play video. You might want to show something that the group's made. Perhaps they made collaboratively made a banner or a different kind of artwork. That might be something to kind of share to demonstrate what kind of activities your group gets up to. But generally you want to make sure also that we're demonstrating some of our methods, so involving children and young people, asking them questions and asking them to participate actively in the assembly. We've got a couple of different examples of presentations that have been used for assemblies that will be shared on the page. All of them describe kind of a typical group session and the benefits of joining, such as fun, new friends, try new things, a chance to have your say. And one of them also does a bit of explaining this, what woodcraft folk is, but using kind of sign language actions to help children join in. So it makes it that active, participatory approach, but also trying to be inclusive and teaching hearing children sign language actions that they might be able to use with their peers. Overall, for a primary school, you want to keep it quite short, 15 to 20 minutes, and give people lots of interaction and chance for young people to ask their own questions of you. A taster session is a little bit more time, a little bit more chance for the young people very much to be participating and engaged. So in a primary school, you might be invited for a session that's between 40 minutes and an hour on average. And you want to include like a mix of games, cooperative activities, crafts that they can take home with them, and generally showing them kind of things they might get up to at group night, and making sure you give them also a leaflet that they can take home with details of the local group, so that they know how to follow up if they are interested. For a secondary school or high school, it's more likely to be an hour. You might like to try and use a mix of kind of icebreaker game and introduction activity. Some kind of cooperative challenge is good for demonstrating woodcraft folk kind of principles, or having a kind of discussion or debate on a topical issue. So kind of having challenges and discussions are a good way to ensure young people can kind of get a taste of what woodcraft folk is about, enjoy what they're doing, and make your visit memorable so that they might come and join a group. Whether you're doing a assembly or a taster session, you need to think about the practicalities. So in terms of equipment, schools really appreciate if they don't have to supply much. So try and do activities which use simple equipment that you can bring with them. Although often schools will be happy to provide things like they have every day, like paper, scissors, colouring pens, that kind of thing. So you could ask your local co-op for donation. So within the work that development officers on the New Groups project in the Eastern region have done, quite often they run an activity that is about working cooperatively as a team to build the tallest tower out of spaghetti and marshmallows. So if you have a local co-op store, one of the ways that they might be able to support you in this outreach is through materials that they have, by giving you an in-kind donation. And something like spaghetti and marshmallows, if that's the main resource that you need, is something that they quite often will have in stock and be able to provide you with. If you do need schools to provide you with anything in particular, let them know beforehand so they can have it on hand. And check with them where your activity is going to take place. So are you going to be in a classroom? Are you going to go in outside space? Are you going to use the main hall? It's worth also asking them what support there'll be from teachers or teaching assistants, then bearing that in mind with how many volunteers you have able to go and help run the activity. If the class teacher and any teaching assistants are also there, it might be possible to run it just on your own or just with a couple of people, whereas if there's an expectation that you will have greater responsibility for the children and young people, you might want more people to come and support the running activity, especially with a large group. Ask if there are any children with any special needs that might need to be taken into account so you can make your activity as inclusive as possible. Make sure you take flyers that have the group details so that you can promote the group and you can turn this outreach activity in a school into growing the membership of your group on a weekly basis. But also remember that schools will have their reasons for their own safeguarding policies, and don't take any photos of children whilst taking part in the activities unless you've got explicit permission from the school that it is fine to do so. Either just take photos of what they've made, or ask their staff members, their teachers, if they're willing to take photos, because they will know and be able to handle more sensitively which children might be able to be included in photos and which might not. It might not always be possible to get into a school to be running a taster session during term time, or even to do an assembly. So other things you might like to think about, they might have other events where you could have a stand or stall, or local community events where children from that school might be encouraged to attend. So there's the kind of school fairs in the summer or in the winter. There might be parent-teacher associations who organise events or meetings that you could offer to run a free activity at. It might be part of a fundraiser for them, and you can offer a free activity that will help them meet their goal. Or there might be events with the local community using the school facilities, such as a flower show, a village fete, or a local wildlife trust event. If those fail and you really can't in person get a chance to speak to children or young people a part of the school, it might be worth approaching them for other ways you can get the message out to that school's community. So sometimes they have an e-parent mail or a newsletter that they might be willing to put a little bit of information advertising the group. It's always worth mentioning that Woodcraft Folk is a charity, and our groups are run by volunteers to help encourage them to promote the organisations. You can also ask if they would be willing to put flyers in book bags, particularly in primary schools, handing them out for all the young people in the relevant age group to take home. You can ask them how many are in each class on average, bundle them up ready, and then they can just hand out depending on the class sizes, the right amount to each class to help them hand it out. And making it as easy as possible for the school to do will give you a greater chance of success, them facilitating that to you. So we've got a lot of resources to help you support outreach work in schools that's worth having a look at. So there is going to be uploaded to the page where this video is on the website. There'll be a letter template, there'll be a PowerPoint presentation, and there'll be a link to videos and the outline of a flyer that you might like to use to help promote your group. Again, if you have any questions about schools outreach, feel free to email those through to myself at pippa.gardner@woodcraft.org.uk, and I will be happy to help.